He was standing here when he was killed.
Every year, millions of Canadians have some kind of interaction with police, and most end well. But a CBC News investigation this week shed light on how often those interactions turn deadly. CBC journalists spent months gathering almost 20 years of records and building Canada's first database of fatal encounters with police. It shows that 460 people died from 2000 to the end of 2017, including Jackie Baker's son.
People like Beau and others who have died this way with mental health issues should not die so easily.
And that's one of the key findings. Nearly half of the people who died showed signs of mental health issues. Dorothy Cotton is a forensic psychologist in Kingston.
Very often they're terrified, they're scared, and they're going to respond the way any of us do when we're scared. So part of it is really to make them feel safe, to make them try and get across a message that, you're not there to cause trouble, you're there to calm things down.
But a lack of mental health resources means police are often called when things have already progressed to a crisis. Jacques Marcoux is a CBC News journalist who compiled much of the data at the root of these stories. He joins us from Winnipeg. So Jacques, you, me, and many of our colleagues across the country have been working with this data to produce stories this week. Let's talk first of all about how it was pulled together. Where did you look to find it?
It started about, I think, last spring. This was almost 12 months ago. We just started exploring the concept. Could it be done? A couple of stories like this in the US had been done by the Washington Post, so we sort of looked at what they did and we thought maybe we could replicate that in Canada because this data doesn't exist here either. So we explored what was available through StatsCan, through police agencies, and we realized pretty quickly we hit a wall. There was no sort of low-hanging fruit of information. So we enlisted the help of a team of professional researchers that we have at the CBC, and they literally just went through every police report, every court record, family interviews, news clippings from newspapers that no longer exist, going back into the early 2000s. And just row by row, we eventually built a database of over 461 Canadians who have been killed by police.
And a lot of that data sort of is part of like a, as you can imagine, an Excel spreadsheet, right, that shows their age, whether they had a weapon, if they had some kind of weapon, what was it, if they had one at all. That this information is not just a number crunch exercise, but there's so much more in it.
That's right. We had discussions with a couple of criminologists to sort of help guide us in how we should gather this information. We also wanted to know, we had to brainstorm as to what answers do we want to be able to have at the end of this, and that sort of dictates what we had to gather and harvest from the get-go. One thing we wanted to harvest that we couldn't get was how many seconds elapsed from the time that police arrived and the time that the person was dead. I think that would have been very insightful. It would have given us a lot of context for how quickly these things escalate. But we tried for a couple of weeks and we realized it wasn't really possible to get that information. So then we sort of had to move on and keep looking for other sort of angles that we could explore.
And we should mention that Jackie Baker, the woman that I spoke to that we saw just a moment ago, her son was killed within 2 minutes of police arriving. An example of why people are curious about that information. Now that this database is together, how might it be used?
I think when you work with, this is almost, we're kind of dabbling almost in social sciences at this point, right? This isn't like traditional news where one person's accountable and you have a document and there's sort of a gotcha moment. This is really like a systemic social problem. So having information is key for decision makers, for police departments, for trainers, for politicians. It allows them to make informed decisions, about how to structure training, about what the trends are, about how the trends are changing. Academics were thrilled to learn that we had done this exercise because otherwise they're just speculating essentially. So now I would anticipate that they're going to make use of this information as well. But it's also useful for just accountability because now you have a benchmark. We actually now know approximately each year how many people are being killed or are dying in interactions with law enforcement.
Thank you for this, Jacques.
Thank you.